Welcome friends! November is usually most notable for dudes running around sporting unreasonable stashes in the name of Movember, but this time around we're also happy to introduce our new Humble Choice related series, Inspection. Month by month we'll be diving into Humble's ongoing offer, spend at the very least 3 hours on each game, and give you our thoughts on whether we recommend you pick up the select titles and the overall package or not. Following the short reviews of each game, we'll summarize our thoughts at the end. Without holding any more of your valuable time hostage, let us dive right in.
The developer Alt-Shift did it. Crying Suns is a great game that successfully fuses FTL with Into the Breach. In this tactical roguelike, you play as a fleet commander who is awoken in a cloning facility and immediately finds himself in distress, and you will have to uncover the mystery why everything has fallen apart in the galaxy. Although it has a lot in common with FTL. The game also introduces several twists and tweaks to it. The base is all the same. You command the ship and its squadrons through the nodes until the finish, where you get into another galaxy, with new biomes and enemies. The resource management has also a lot in common with FTL, like fuel, currency, but in this game you will have to also manage your commandos who will do missions on different planets, which is a rock paper scissors kinda game, and your squadrons who you will manage during the fights on a hex-based map in real time with pause options, and also your officers and guns during the same fights while you are commanding your squadrons. The strongest points are absolutely the art direction and the theme. Crying Suns is a beautiful pixelated graphics scheme with great music and the sound effects to match. It is a story-heavy game, and from its onset, Crying Suns sells the mood and sells it very well. The only downside of this game, that in some scenarios it gets repetitive and some events are predefined. All in all, this is a fantastic game, definitely worth choosing, and a true and even greater successor of FTL. I had a metric ton of fun while playing this, and I can strongly suggest picking it up.
Youropa is a 3D puzzle platformer in which you play as you, short for European, a humanoid figure with suction cups for feet, who wakes up hanging upside down from a tree atop a piece of ruin floating above the clouds. Looking around, you'll see similar areas floating in all directions, connected by what seem to be colorful neon tunnels between doors, all of this centered around a piece that eerily resembles the bottom part of the Eiffel Tower. These platforms are going to serve as your playground for the 6 to 8 hours long journey Youropa offers. On a micro level, your aim is reaching the next door by tackling the obstacles placed in front of you on the individual levels. For this, your toolset slowly but surely expands over time, whilst at the start your only feat is climbing walls or any other surface you manage to walk upon. Later, you'll be able to run, jump, use different items and so on. Unlike in previously discussed Tsioque, the puzzle difficulty of Youropa seems to be just about right. You will admittedly come across tougher cookies every now and then, but if you manage to wrap your head around the concept of everything being a floor if approached correctly and look close enough, you should be able to figure out everything. Unfortunately, the previously mentioned concept, as cool as it sounds, does bring its own issue to the party. That being the slightly nauseating feeling you get after about 2 hours of gameplay in one sitting. Don't get me wrong, this might not be something that impacts everyone, but if you even in the slightest way suffer from motion sickness or anything alike, I would recommend steering far away from this game. For everyone else, while completing puzzles, you'll be looking at collecting neon pink tapes and spray painting walls as an additional challenge. I'd like to point out 2 weird choices made by the devs that I don't think impacts the fun to be had with this game, but for sure puzzle me to date. Firstly, every now and then you'll come across enemy creatures that after a short delay head right towards you to use their fists as a way to explain how little you are welcome around that area. Now the way this all plays out is Beastie sees you, Beastie thinks, Beastie attacks, Beastie stunlocks you, you die. I don't get what's the need for the stunlock part, why can't Beastie just one-shot kill me and we can both move on with our lives? Second interesting design choice is related to traversing the different levels of the game, which you can do in two ways. Either you walk through the doors and progress as designed one by one, or you go back to the menu and select any map you would like to revisit for some reason. Should you, however, decide to go with the latter option, you get punished by the game immediately, removing 80 to 90% of your HP pool, which makes little to no sense. Given how meaningless a resource HP is for an overwhelming majority of the game, as mentioned earlier, this really has little to no impact on the overall experience. On the back of the interesting concept, the beautiful graphics and neat sound design, I can but recommend picking up this title and taking it out for a spin. Oh, and as an additional side note, I'll just quickly mention there's also a level editor to give you creative freedom should you feel like a 3D puzzle architect.
Yakuza Kiwami 2 by Sega is an open-world story-driven beat-em-up game that continues the story from Kiwami 1. Now I have to admit that I haven't played Yakuza 0 and Kiwami 1, however after a bit of googling and reading, I booted the game up and jumped right into it. The game looks good, especially the major characters and the two cities, Karamucho and Sotenbori. It truly feels amazing walking those streets and going into those shops and restaurants. The story is well written and I was instantly pulled in. Characters are a forte on this franchise, and Kiwami 2 has very interesting characters. Some new, some old, and still quite a lot of character development for some of the oldies, while also introducing us to some new interesting faces that will surely play an important role in the future of the saga. The gameplay is interesting. I had to play on a keyboard and mouse as my Logitech controller had issues with the game, yet it is still quite enjoyable without it. I quite like the combos and the different variations of weapons and items that I could utilize during these fights. It almost felt intuitive. The other big plus for this game are the minigames and other activities you can do, such as running a hostess club, playing cards, mahjong, different arcades, and also the sub-stories. I was laughing my ass off. My favorite sub-story included an almost completely naked muscular man who photographed me as I was posing as a lovely maid, also half naked. The only downside I have experienced with the game were the semi-frequent crashes after about 13 hours. And they never really went away. I have tried to fix it, but it seems like it might be some software issue as I have tried to recreate the problem to see if it is my hardware, but everything went great, so it might have been an isolated issue. And here I would like to add the note. I tried to recreate the problem like 6 times, and on the 6th time Yakuza Kiwami crashed so hard I had to reinstall Windows. So there's that. After that I uninstall the game. All in all, I had great fun with this one, and I can only recommend this for those who like beat 'em up games and like Japanese culture, because it is very prevalent in it, and also for those who like the beat 'em up games. And I really hope for you guys it won't crash.
Tsioque is a classic point-and-click adventure with one of the cutest plot twists out there and completely unnecessary, borderline annoying QTE sessions. Options are basically non-existent, let's not even waste our time on them. Rather, what exists instead is a nice intro, written in rhymes, told by someone that sounds quite like Deckard Cain.
Long, long ago, somewhere nearby yet far.
Pairing the Diablo universe with the visuals of Tsioque made everything so much more fun. As mentioned already, if you give the game a chance, you'll be playing a classic point-and-click adventure for the majority of the 2-3 hours worth of experience. If you're not familiar with the concept, this means you'll be looking at gorgeously drawn environments, clicking everything you can imaginably click to gain knowledge of what's interactable and what's not, so you can figure out what you want to pair with what to be able to progress. I'll take this opportunity to mention that whilst majority of the puzzles are reasonable, there are a few frustrating ones to figure out, and there's even a mirror puzzle that I'm not ashamed I had to look up the solution for, and even then I was struggling to execute properly. Be warned. I'm also torn on the QTE events in the game. While I understand the idea of spicing up the slow gameplay with some fast-paced action, the execution here feels poor and out of place. I definitely would have preferred the game without any of it. I would, however, advise you put these two issues aside, who knows, you might even like the QTEs, and give Tsioque a chance, because it is definitely a piece of eye candy and an ultra sweet story that's worth playing.
Rover Mechanic Simulator. And this is yet another simulator game, this time on Mars with Mars rovers. As the technician, you will be working on these things. Firstly, you'll get the mission or request on your tablet from one of the companies or agencies. Then you drop the package that contains the rover you will be fixing via a crane onto a platform, which is a mandatory task, and it will become quickly annoying. And after this you can analyze which part is faulty. Spoiler alert, it is almost always mentioned every time you read the mission brief. So in those rare cases, when it isn't already told which part is broken, and after you finally found the problematic part, it is high time for some unscrewing and removing parts, which at first is quite enjoyable, I'm not going to lie. But after the fourth time it becomes tedious and it will take most of your time, apart from the craning. So, you remove the faulty part, it is now time to A. Fix it, clean it and replace it, or B. Get even more smaller parts out of the already removed part, and once that's done, or you have 3D printed out the new parts that are needed, it is going back to point A, meaning we fix it. After we fix the problematic part, it is time to put everything back, meaning more screwing. The last part is the recalibration of the operating system, which is a little logic game with rotatable lines, which is actually fun, although it's not really hard. I have to be honest folks, the game looks fine and dandy, and the whole deal is quite interesting and fun in the first 2-3 hours. But after that, for me, it became a repetitive chore that I didn't want to do at all.
While Smile for Me likes to pose as a casual, point-and-click indie adventure game, don't let this disguise fool you, friends. Reality is, Smile for Me is nothing other than an invitation to take an acid-infused stroll down Cardboard Town. You appear to enter an online platform called The Habitat, ran by a certain Dr. Habit, where you are greeted by a weird little girl. After enlightening you that you are the flower delivery kid from town, she walks you through the basics of the game. Step 1, you'll be chatting up the different residents of the habitat. Specifically, they'll be talking and you'll be answering by either nodding or shaking your head, which turns out to be a more immersive concept than one would expect. Step 2, as everyone here appears to be depressed, you'll be aiming to cheer them up by doing favors for them. Step 3, they reward your efforts by giving you items which you can then use to complete other favors. Step 4, rinse and repeat. While doing so, you'd be wise to keep an eye on your pocket watch, as the habitat appears to have a strict bedtime, which, should you break, will lend you opportunities to watch Dr. Habit's bedtime stories. Not only are these not exactly heartwarming, but this will also result in you sleeping in the next day, losing precious time you could instead be spending on cheering up the others. Just like Youropa, Smile for Me also delivers a box of challenging but fair puzzles that should keep you occupied for 3 to 4 hours before you get to see the first of 3 available endings to the story. Sounds and music are both serviceable, nothing more. On the other hand, the matter of the weird-ass visuals I'm sure is going to be a deal breaker for some. For me, I'll admit it wasn't giving me any tingles at first either, but it certainly grew on me over time. I hope it'll be the same for you as well. Don't waste your time wondering whether or not you should try Smile for Me. Load it up and enjoy the simple gameplay loop spiced with a dash of weirdo vibes.
Imperator Rome was given to us by Paradox Games, who are well known to deliver very detailed and hard to learn games. It is all the same with Imperator Rome, which is a grand strategy game like Youropa Universalis and Crusader Kings, only I didn't enjoy this one as much as the previous ones. I have started the tutorial playing Rome to get a hang of the gameplay. At first it was complex as Crusader Kings, and I quickly found that I have failed my first try. So I jumped in for the second round. Slowly I got the hang of it, how to build armies, how to handle the religion, diplomacy, etc. It was a lot of information to handle that also involved a lot of reading, and the UI didn't help at all. I was lost many times and I had to spend minutes looking for a specific tab, and sadly, the tutorial wasn't that helpful. Information panels overlap one another, and important information is hidden on rarely visited tabs. The art direction of the UI is terrible, whilst previously referenced games opted for abstracted simple shapes to represent tabs. Imperator uses weird oversized pieces of art. I was clicking on the wrong tabs all the time. When it comes to the graphics, the game is strong. It looks great even while it is zoomed in, so I have no problem with that. Although I have played with Crusader Kings and I've seen how the fighting in these games works, somehow I couldn't shake the feeling that I need combat mechanics I got used to in Rome Total War. Maybe because of the same setting. I had hoped that the fighting won't be as janky as in Crusader Kings, but ultimately I have experienced the same jankiness. Apart from the UI and overall hardships of getting all the informations you may need, my other problem was that I have tried playing other nations, but they have little to no difference compared to playing as Rome. It all felt the same. I have hoped to be the underdog with big setbacks and pretty bad economy, but it wasn't the case. The usual gameplay breaks down to managing your settlements, trying to navigate diplomacy, and you just kinda wait for things to happen. And fighting other nations somehow feels lackluster. Overall, I found the tutorial completely unhelpful. The game mechanics are not substantial to the enjoyment of the game. In the end, it seems like a wonderfully deep simulation, but a very bad game to play.
Following the inclusion of Evoland in the September 2020 bundle, we now get another title from Shiro Games, Darksburg, which leaves me wondering, could it be possible that Northgard will also be a choice soon? Anyhow, for the time being, back to Darksburg, which is a roguelike hack-and-slash ARPG that mostly conveys a sensation of playing Left 4 Dead or Vermintide from a top-down perspective. The options menu is just deep enough with a handful of UI settings, a selection of graphics options, and a surprising amount of separate audio sliders to accommodate yours and your computer's needs. Your first decision to make is whether you want to go in solo with AI partners, which I wouldn't recommend as the AI is barely anything more than serviceable, or in a team, which is also a varied experience. I've spent 10 plus minutes on a weekend afternoon waiting in vain for anyone to show up, but at 11 in the night on a random weekday, my lobby filled in seconds. My recommendation would definitely be rounding up a group of friends for this experience. Second decision, you get to choose from 5 characters. A battle nun that reminds me of the Sisters of Sigmar, a poison-wielding mad scientist lady, and a trio of a bearded fatso, a werewolf, and a crossbow woman who freakishly bring back memories of Gragas, Warwick and Wayne. Doesn't matter, inspiration comes from many places, real question here is, what the gameplay is like. Well, you're going to be running around slaying hordes of zombie minions, sprinkled with a few tougher beasties fighting your way through the city of Darksburg. In a MOBA-like fashion, your arsenal consists of auto attacks, 3 basic abilities which don't cost you any resource, only cooldown timers, and an ultimate ability that you have to charge up before use. Racking up bodies earns XP, which is shared by the team members, and upon leveling up, you get to choose from 3 perks that are randomly offered from a pool. Should you discover all nooks and crannies, you'll also find treasure chests containing gold, which you can spend between the districts of the city in a shop, items which you can use to further enhance your gameplay, or tomes that offer additional perks. Should you manage to get to the end, you'll get a chance to face off against the final boss, and hopefully come out victorious. During your ordeals, you will also be collecting bluish-purple candy bars, which then you can spend on unlocking additional passive power-ups, such as increased damage or HP, on-screen indicators of important objects, and so on and so forth. So far, all sounds good, but I'll share my concerns as well. There appear to be 2 aspects of imbalance in Darksburg. On one hand, the 2 ranged characters feel far more viable than the 3 melee ones, which of course can just be a case of my own playstyle preference, but I was really struggling with the latter. Secondly, attempting the game on normal difficulty is a breeze. Going in blind, not even reading my abilities, we just stomped through with Kali on our first attempt, but then going in on Ascension 1, which is essentially the second difficulty, mobs get stronger and get a random affix, game difficulty spiked real hard. I only managed to get through that with my 5th random party. I'm definitely not against difficult games, but it does feel like a difficulty setting or 2 was skipped here. For the sake of an objective-esque illustration, 52% of the player base has managed to kill the final boss in normal, whilst only 16 can say the same of Ascension 1. Next problem goes hand in hand with this one, which is the difficulty of finding players who will actually help you get through instead of just hindering you. A further point of concern is replayability. Idea is, for this game, this comes from the procedurally generated maps, the random perk choices and the modifiers of the higher ascensions, but it's important to emphasize, at the end of the day, despite all of these random changes, you're only going to be facing the same enemies in the same environments over and over again. There aren't even multiple final boss options, just the one. You be the judge of whether that's good enough for you or not. To summarize everything, Darksburg is a game with a lot of potential should more content be put in by the devs. It has pretty graphics, nice sound design, and a repetitive but challenging gameplay loop. If you can gather a party, give it a go, but if you're a solo player, I'd steer away.
Little Misfortune is a 2D side-scrolling adventure game. You play as Misfortune Ramirez Hernandez, a little girl with unfortunate luck. Following her new friend Mr. Voice, she sets out on an adventure to find the eternal happiness. This would all sound nice and dandy if Mr. Voice wouldn't have told me in the very first minute that indeed Misfortune will die that day. This already set the game's tone a bit darker than expected, and as the game went on it got way darker. The game itself discusses a lot of issues like violence, negligence, suicide, and so on. Yet the game feels upbeat mostly because how Mr. Voice uses dark humor and how Misfortune just throws glitter at these things to make them happy. You control Misfortune left or right and make decisions for her along the way. Every choice you make has a bearing on the overall outcome of the game. If something bad happens, you can throw glitter at it to make it seem more happy and cartoony, and it makes Misfortune to move on. You sometimes control Misfortune's hand in minigames, like shooting an alarm that scatters the drug-dealing guinea pigs. Yes, that is actually in the game. Also, I have kicked the bird in the nuts. So what? The voice acting is great, and the story itself holds tight. Although the game itself can be finished in a few hours, I can easily suggest this game for those who enjoy dark humor or just have a slightly darker taste in things.
This looks like the science project Daddy has in the basement. I don't know why, but Mommy was really angry about it.
The third installment of the Darksiders series has you playing Fury, third of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, who sets out with one purpose only, becoming the leader of the horsemen. Soon, however, she must realize there might be more at stake here than she first bargained for. One thing's for sure, neither fiddling around with what I'd say barely hits the minimum expectation from a AAA game's options menu. I mean, did you really not have the budget for deeper audio settings than 3 sliders? Nor making your way through the main menu, which acts weirdly clunky and unresponsive if you're using mouse and keyboard. You should take the hint and grab your controller. That's the way you'll actually get to enjoy the experience. Will bring a smile to anyone's face. Luckily, putting aside the unpleasant launch experience, I came across nothing but fun times. The core gameplay loop is mostly that of a spectacle fighter, sprinkled with a dash of Souls-like. You'll be running around stomping weenies, attempting not to anger too many mid-sized enemies at the same time, lest they might just crush you in a group, and challenging bosses and mini-bosses. You have a dodge move, which if timed properly awards you with a beefy counter-attack, multiple weapon options, which, just as new moves, unlock as you progress. You can further tailor your character by leveling her up to spend attribute points, as well as modifying your gear with different enhancements. The environment is jaw-dropping beautiful, and the sound design is also the quality you expect from a AAA title. None of the previously mentioned is really new for this franchise, but what did catch me by surprise was the seemingly more open than usual world. Prior titles were already built in a way that you would come across obstacles you knew you'd have to come back to once you unlocked the correct tool to handle it, but still, you were mostly shepherded down a strict path of progression. This time around, albeit there's an indicator present at all times, pointing you towards the direction of the nearest story progressing fight, based on the first 5 hours of gameplay, it seems you are given much more freedom to maneuver. At some point, it clicked to me that my new weapon can open a route I remembered I couldn't access earlier, which led me to going down a road leading dead away from my actual target for like an hour until I decided I'll just pause this investigation for the time being and get back to finding the next sin so I can beat him up as he surely deserves so. Darksiders 3 is a great game, worthy of being one of the 2 main selling points of this month's bundle. Don't miss out on it.
Townsmen, A Kingdom Rebuilt, is a town-building management game where you will guide your inhabitants from their first steps living in a small village to establishing a massive medieval city. Looking at the cover and the art, it all sounded pretty damn good, and it was the first game I have tried from this bundle. The tutorial was decent, every part of the game was shown, and the player is quickly, yet gently, gets eased into the game. It goes through buildings, resources and their management, trading and nature's impact on the game, and the fighting system as well. So I was looking forward to have a good time. However, while playing the tutorial, I had a feeling that I couldn't shake. The game felt like something from a mobile game. Looking it up, my gut feeling turned out to be right, and this game was indeed originally made as a mobile platform game. It wouldn't be a problem if it would work as a charm, however, it really feels when it comes to the gameplay. For example, the placement of the buildings for me felt janky. Sometimes I was sure I can place something, when in reality it would not fit there for some reason. Or the fixed view of the game, which is an isometric view. My main problem, however, is the waiting. For some reason, buildings takes a long time to be built. Gathering resources also takes a long time. My feeling was that if you are playing this on a mobile platform, that would usually be the case, like when you're waiting for things to be built and it's a built-in feature so you can spend real money to quickly build it up. However, when you are playing on a PC, that is an issue because you can't have microtransactions like that. So they have added a speed up button, but even with that the whole thing just feels awfully slow. The management part of the game is pretty self-explanatory. If the people are hungry, you have to build food resources for them. If they are cold because of the winter, you get them clothing, wool and wood. The graphics are nice, even while zoomed in, although nothing too fancy. However, the fixed view bugs me very much. It is 2020 and I like my strategy games from multiple views. Overall, it is a nice management game, however, because its slowness and fixed view, it doesn't really fit me very well.
Darkwood is an isometric survival horror game that basks in the idea of giving the player as little information as possible. Options-wise, there's nothing to gloat about, but nor is there anything to be ashamed of. It's serviceable given the pixel art nature of the design. Jumping into the game, your feet land in the prologue that walks you through interacting with the world around you. Moving around, handling obstacles, how to find, collect and use items, and fighting. And that's pretty much all the info you'll get your hands on. Discovering everything else is up to you. Gameplay is split into 2 distinct parts. Daytime is me time. You get to walk around discovering the world you woke up in, collecting materials of which you can create tools or defenses for your safe house, investigating the plot. Nighttime, on the other hand, is them time. You will be crawled up in one of the corners of your hideout, praying to whatever you believe in to survive till daybreak. Because they will be coming. Graphics and sounds are top notch, as long as you're a fan of the pixel art nature, and both of these feed into the game's biggest forte, mood building. Working together with the idea of denial to feed you knowledge, Darkwood builds such a heavy atmosphere of uncertainty that it carries even the annoyingly boring combat system. Seeing, however, that the focus of this game isn't combat, I'm left with one major issue regarding Darkwood, and even that is 100% subjective. For me, the tempo of this game is way too slow. Even though I feel curiosity to what's going on, seeing what will happen on day 10, 15 or 40, the thought of slowly crawling through the upcoming day and night kept me from going back to the woods since testing. Allow me to repeat though, this is purely subjective. If you're one for horror and or survival games, if you have no issues with slower paced games, I'm positive you'll find a treasure in Darkwood, and you shouldn't hesitate putting your hands on it. Let us see then, where does all the aforementioned land us with regards to this month's bundle. We get a choice of different aspects of brain teasers. A puzzle platformer, 2 point and clicks, a few strategy games and a simulator as well. To unwind our mind, we can take out an adventure game, a spectacle fighter or a beat 'em up for a spin, go and obliterate throngs of zombies in Darksburg, or enjoy the atmosphere of a survival horror title. Top end of the package, in our opinion, is Crying Suns, Tsioque, Darksiders 3, Smile for Me and Youropa. The only entry noticeably lagging behind is Townsmen, while the others are solid competitors for the middle of the pack. This sums up to be a solid score of 28 out of the maximum 36 for November 2020. We're absolutely happy to recommend picking up this bundle while you can. If you found what you heard helpful, don't hesitate to let us know in YouTube language by liking the video. If you'd like to come along for next month's ride, please subscribe. If you have any recommendations at all for us moving forward, let us know in the comments section, and we hope to see you all again in December.